Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Monday Night Conscious Community Class with me, Matthew Brownstein. Just a little bit about me and tonight's topic. I didn't make a PowerPoint, so we're just going to let the thoughts flow. I'm the founder of the Institute of Interpersonal Hypnotherapy and also onlinemonastery.com. So a lot of these teachings that occur relate also to what I call the Anahat teachings, the materials that come from my book. So more than just a hypnotherapy school. Yet the theme for the hypnotherapy school, which is Institute of Interpersonal Hypnotherapy, the theme for that school for this month is A Course in Miracles. I have an upcoming workshop this weekend on Saturday. It's a one-day kind of meditation retreat. We'll dive very deeply into A Course in Miracles, talking about all the main concepts. And tonight, we'll dive into a few of those as we talk about how to be comfortable being alone. This was actually a topic on a big list that my marketing team sent over, and they said, choose some of these to talk about. People seem to be interested in these topics. What are my qualifications for talking about being comfortable being alone? I love it. I love being alone. So if you're not comfortable with being alone, you're talking to someone who's very proficient at being alone for long periods of time. But more than that, as a Course in Miracles teacher, there has to be a reason behind everything we do, right? There's meaning and purpose, or there's just things we're making up, right? So some context behind why the talk being comfortable being alone could be so beautiful based on A Course in Miracles teachings is because in the Course we have truth and we have illusion. We have ego and we have spirit. When we're caught up in illusion and ego, we tend to be misguided, right? When we come into this human experience, we are, from the most of us who survive birth, there was somebody there, right? So you come into the world and there are people. I'm joking as if like there wasn't somebody there. Anyway, I only meant that in the best way. So when someone's born, there's going to be other people there. All the other people that are around them as they grow up tend to show them what the world is, right? They teach you things, they explain things. Our life is so much centered around other people, and it can be terrifying to be alone. But there's so much value and benefit to being alone. So being around others can be a good thing, right? And being alone can also be a good thing. I'm not an advocate only for alone, right? Sometimes we're with people, sometimes we're alone. But if you have a problem being alone, then you have a problem because sometimes you're going to be alone. This might make you terrified of losing your relationships if you're so afraid of being alone. It can make you quite codependent and clingy because you're not okay with yourself. I've heard a wonderful quote. If you take in a Westerner and put that person into solitary confinement, they will come out insane, right? That's like the worst punishment within, not cruel and unusual, but like the worst thing we can do to somebody, which isn't necessarily cruel and unusual, is say, go sit in a room by yourself, right? So let's not pretend that can be extremely difficult. Okay, so they say if you put a Westerner into solitary confinement, he will come out insane. Excuse me. If you put an Easterner into solitary confinement, he will come out enlightened. Gravel Hall's been doing a lot of talking today. All right, so if you put an Easterner in solitary confinement, he or she will come out enlightened. Why? Spiritual discipline called sadhana has many different aspects to it, things we can do to be able to really accelerate our spiritual growth. Consider silence and solitude to be a profound tool for spiritual growth. Excuse me. It can be much more than that as you start to explore it. But let me encourage you, if you're new to this idea, or even if you realize the benefit of it, take more time. Just take a little bit more time alone. I don't want this to make you antisocial and cause problems in your relationships. But wherever you're at in life, that alone time can be incredibly precious. I had a spiritual teacher. He was talking about needs. He said, you have no needs. Needs are not natural. You think you need a person. You think you need this and this. You have is who you truly are, spirit. You have no needs. So if you think you need another person, He's like, well, how do you get over that? How do you challenge yourself to deal with that? Go be alone. You force yourself to just spend time alone. When I heard that teaching, he was explaining that loneliness is a blockage in your system. That if you're capable of feeling lonely, or even the feeling of alone, to ever feel that you're alone or lonely, that's a block in your divine energy flow. And so the talk tonight will relate a lot to how you can utilize silence and solitude to burn away significant personal blockages. And one of the biggest ones being, I'm lonely, and therefore I'm sad because I'm lonely, and therefore I'm overeating because I'm lonely, right? So think about the root of so many negative behaviors. It's because you're terrified of being alone, right? I don't know what to do. I'm not comfortable by myself. What's the first thought the mind comes up with? Find a way to get with other people. And not to say you shouldn't do that, not to say that's unhealthy, right? People are very healthy. But we're talking about utilizing silence and solitude to burn through blockages that you can't burn through when you're with other people. When we're with other people, we tend to burn through a lot of blockages, right? So to go into silence and solitude and avoid people would be a mistake. But we're saying one way or another, this talk tonight is about embracing what it means to be alone. So I'm taking that a step further to the monastic traditions, which honor the incredible value of solitude. Okay, so when I heard that teaching from this teacher of mine, I was like, I hate being alone. I'm like in my early 20s when I heard this teaching. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to go camping by myself, which seemed crazy to me at the time. And I'm just going to sit in my tent and do nothing but just sit there. And I'm going to feel what that feels like. There was a couple in the tent just down the way, and you could tell they're having fun, probably making love. And, now I'm like, a single guy in college sitting by myself, no one in the tent with me, and, oh, poor me. And then I'm like, oh my God, the self-pity. Oh my God, the loneliness and the sadness. Then, the fear, like, what if there's bears in the woods and I'm by myself? And what if I'm alone for the rest of my life? I saw why people go insane being alone, because all of your stuff starts percolating up. If you're looking for a chance for incredibly powerful spiritual growth, go sit still by yourself for a long period of time, right? It's advanced spiritual practice. So I'm just saying, do it a little bit here and there. I lived at a Zen monastery, and sometimes some of the monks don't live in the monastery with their community. They got to a stage in their growth where they just said, I need to be alone, right? Like I was saying when I started this, when we are born into families and people are conditioning us, they're teaching us all about life. And it's not like we have to get more life lessons at a certain stage. It's actually, we realize we have to unlearn all the insanity that we were taught. Right? We were taught all about sickness and division and war and famine, and we learned a lot of wacky ideas, right? And a lot of these ideas are human-made. So at some point when you pull away from all of it, you can extract yourself from the matrix. You just literally say, I'm going to spend a period of time alone. I've done this for weekends. I remember my first 9-day retreat in my Zen teacher's house, where I was house sitting, and he's taught me how to do a retreat. And for 9 days, no food for half of that time, I just sat there meditating, and then started finding so much value to number one, which we'll talk about, how to really get in touch with your stuff. But then even more important than that, in a sense, is what's left when you've gone through your stuff. So the same teaching now applies to when you're in a relationship or not. But let's say for tonight, because we're talking about how to be comfortable being alone, just make yourself be alone. And I would encourage you for long periods of time, like set a timer and say for 1 hour, no TV, no cell phone, no computer, right? Just go, if you can do it outside, go sit under a tree, right? What did Buddha do before he became enlightened? He sat under a tree, right? In the Bible, what is the prescription to get to know God? Be still and know that I am God. In A Course in Miracles, it says, you are still as God created you. And that has a double meaning. You are still as God created you. You are still exactly as you were created. Your essence is still intact. You're not broken. You're whole and complete. Your essence is perfectly whole and complete. In the world's view, there's division, right? There's labeling, there's perceptual filters. And at Course in Miracles, we work to shift through all of that. So a lot of therapy, whether it's mental health therapy or doctor, Western medical type of therapy, a lot of it is based on the diagnostic model, right? And it's a model of using certain filters, like, are you more visual, auditory, kinesthetic, right? Something like that as a filter. Are you introvert or extrovert, right? We're always trying to categorize people. You are so indoctrinated with that programming, you don't even realize it. But when you go away by yourself, you let that stuff start purging and detoxifying. It's just, well, they said that I was not good enough. Huh. And then there it is. You can't hide from it, right? Your false beliefs will come up. Your negative emotions will come up. All of the inner demons come up when you force yourself to be alone. But eventually you can start saying, what is my truth? What do I know to be real, right? What is absolute certainty? So what happens when you just sit still? The silence becomes crushing. It's like literally, if you just force yourself to be in the present moment, you realize you're not even capable of it. Just sitting alone, you realize your heart is really actually quite disturbed. You realize the heart, which is filled with hurt and sadness and grief and pain, is fueling your head, all of your thinking. When you let yourself act on that, you never clean it up, right? So if this is sad and this, right, in case you're listening to audio, I'm pointing to my heart. If my heart feels sad, and my conscious mind says, well, if I call this person, that'll make me feel better. And then who's picking up the phone? An emotion and a thought led to a behavior, right? And underneath that emotion is actually a deeper thought. I'm alone and no one loves me and I'm sad. My mind figured out what to do to make my heart feel better. And then who's picking up the phone? Or it works a different way. I feel like I'm unlovable, not good enough, not attractive, ugly, not deserving of anything, whatever, right? There's a lot of personal lies that we hold inside. That causes negative emotion, right? Now I'm sad. I'm scared to be alone forever. What you also learn about when you look at this is a lot of people, maybe not you, but be willing to look at yourself, hate themselves. I've been doing hypnotherapy now for like 25 years. I have seen so many people who are deeply blocked and walled off. And when you try to get in there and say, what's going on in there? It's hard to get in, not because they're not willing to admit how much they hate their mom and dad, not because they won't tell you that they're afraid of this and that, not because they'll say that they're scared. And you can get most of that stuff, right? I'm sad. He hurt me. I hate him. The thing they don't want to admit is I hate myself. Can you imagine telling someone who hates themselves, you must lock yourself in a room by yourself? That's what they do to prisoners. But monks do the same thing. Advanced yogis, advanced mystics will go and sit alone because you have a chance to purify what's in there in the silence and solitude. Now, again, there's a whole set of teachings for how to do it with others. But this is the teaching of what do you do when you force yourself into the crucible of intense silence and solitude for any period of time. Learn to meditate, learn to sit on a cushion or a recliner, or, just learn how to sit in meditation. When you just sit there, so I'm encouraging meditation, you become aware that you're just sitting there. There's a book by, I think it's Pema Chodron who wrote it, called The Wisdom of No Escape, like a Buddhist nun who's like, just sit. Here we are. You can't really escape your body. You're not letting yourself act out on any of this stuff. You're just going to force yourself to sit. While you're just sitting and breathing, you're going to notice your heart is not okay. You're going to notice your mind is trying to figure out what to do about your heart, which is not okay. The more you watch that process and don't let yourself move, you can pull back from it a bit. So you can say, you'll start noticing, there's a disturbed person in my person, right? Somewhere inside of me, whatever this me thing is, which you'll contemplate as you're alone, right? All right, here's my body. Here's my breathing. Your mind will try to escape and get away, but no, here's my body. Here's my breathing. I'm just sitting here. Oh my God, I hate myself. Oh my God, I'm so afraid that nobody's going to love me in the future. I'm so afraid. Like your mind will make up all sorts of silliness. Realize it's detoxifying in the very moment, because when you're sitting there just observing your human self, you'll learn that you're in there as an observer, that you could observe your heart, you could observe your mind. And then you start saying, well, what is this thing? And why is it so disturbed? Why won't it shut up? First of all, why won't this thing shut up? And why is this thing not okay? You start developing a relationship with your own heart and your own mind. What you want to understand is whatever's detoxifying from there cannot hurt you. But the more you force the human being to sit still and you don't act out on your tendencies. So what is karma? Tendencies, patterns, cause and effect, right? But the cause is this emotionally disturbed being most of the time when it's karma. It is an emotionally not okay heart fueled by the mind who says, well, what are we going to do to make that feel better? And then you act out. When you act out on the pain in your heart, you are creating more karma. For instance, I hate him. Well, the mind says, well, we could kill him because that will get rid of the hate. Oh, okay, says the murderer, right? And then you act on it. Why does it create more karma? Well, I hope that's obvious, right? Because you just killed someone. You did what your heart said to do. That's what psychopaths are. I'm not using diagnostic terms, but people who end up in prisons or mental hospitals quite often do what their heart wants to do without the critical mind saying, maybe we shouldn't do that. But I'm using an extreme example to say if you act out on what's in your heart, you have done something most likely, which is karmic, meaning you've created a pattern for yourself that you didn't actually have to take that journey. So A Course in Miracles calls that a useless journey. Right? So for instance, the heart feels bad. It's all sad because you feel like you're unlovable and not good enough and nobody wants to be with you. And you're very sad. The mind decides that a box of donuts will make you feel better. So then who's getting in the car and driving to get donuts? When you eat those donuts, you're suppressing your feelings. You're putting all that negativity away, but you already acted out on it. So now you have a negative behavior, which is not good for your body, right? And you've done nothing to actually get rid of the pain in your heart. So what do you do when you know these kind of teachings and your heart is disturbed and you're sitting there and your mind is talking about donuts? Don't move. Just keep sitting. When you force yourself with the wisdom of no escape, more and more, just no, I'm staying in the cushion. You'll notice all these tendencies, these temptations to try to do something to make you feel better. Learn to not move. When you just sit there and force yourself and you just watch what's happening, you will again start observing a detoxification process. So for instance, you're sad, you're lonely, you feel not good enough, but you're not doing anything your mind says to do to try to make that feel better. You're just breathing in the moment and you're watching that your heart feels bad. It kind of starts cooking in there. It's like you might cry. You be breathing into it. So you want to relax your body, keep breathing, and just feel your feelings. Just ride the waves of emotion as you're just sitting there, not letting your body move. It's crazy, but really it is the most sane thing to do. When you don't know what to do nothing. There is a force in our body that heals, right? You cut your hand, you leave it alone, it heals itself. It is miraculous, this force of healing. The same force applies to your heart. If you leave it alone, it will heal you completely. But you have to be quite great to do this. How many people are willing to pay? It seems like a sacrifice, right? Like who's willing to sacrifice everything in the world? Right. So if you just sit still, you're saying no football, no beer, no boat parade, no going to the beach. I am sitting still in a dark room with my eyes closed, right? Or eyes open depending how you meditate. But either way, you're forcing yourself to sit still and do nothing. So this is how to get comfortable being alone. You really take it to the extreme of sit there, do nothing. It's only extreme for most people. For a monk, it is as natural as breathing, literally, right? You're just sitting there being with your feelings. It's actually one of the most sane things to do. It gives your body a chance to rest. It gives you a chance to heal. You stop spending money. You stop polluting the environment. You stop creating more karma. Now, I'm not saying you should neglect your family, but when you can carve time off for yourself, right, you sit there and you just sit. You keep watching and observing. What starts to happen is your stuff comes up, but if you don't touch it or do anything about it, it will loosen itself up. And the life force energy itself, that healing energy, will start to transform that. You don't have to be responsible for it. You don't have to psychoanalyze it. You don't even have to do hypnotherapy on it. In these teachings, you just sit there and breathe into it. Now, to tout the virtues of hypnotherapy, I knew these teachings before I knew about hypnotherapy. So I was looking for a profession that could expedite the process of clearing those blocks. So what I've designed through interpersonal hypnotherapy is absolutely a technique that can clear those mental, emotional blocks in your heart. Okay, so you can get facilitation and speed up this process, but you can't get facilitation 24/7. But you can force yourself to sit alone in a room for a week. Get some food if you need to, but then try just sitting alone in a room for a week. And just don't do no TV, no phone, nothing. Just as long as you can carve out time, you do it. Again, you will start noticing your stuff is coming up. Your mind is talking, your heart is blah. You don't need a lot of techniques. I mean, if you learn yoga, you learn Tai Chi, there's a lot of ways to do a retreat. And if anybody wants to reach out to me about how do we do a retreat, I have resources on our onlinemonastery.com and how to structure a retreat. It's like a day or 2, 3, 4 days. But literally, you can go for months or years, depending on your stage of growth, with using the intense spiritual discipline of silence and solitude. Okay, so again, try to eliminate all distractions, sit on a cushion, sit in a chair, whatever you do. And if you're not that disciplined, go for a walk by yourself. Just go sit in a lounge chair by yourself. You're allowed to exercise your body and whatnot during a retreat, but try to minimize distractions. Maybe you read a book, but doing some journaling. It's time to just be with yourself, and it's not meant to seem like a sacrifice or some horrible thing. It's only horrible because you have to stop and look at this thing in you, which appears to be horrible. But when you just sit with it, it has an amazing chance to just heal itself. Let me look in the chat pod, and then I'll encourage you guys, if you have any questions or anything you want to share, please feel free, even though this tends to be more a lecture. Future classes, we're not going to make them classes. It'll be the Illuminated Mind podcast, and it'll be more interview. I think that's just a format that YouTube tends to like better. So probably go in that direction. But for those of you who like the teachings, thanks for being here. Okay. Hello, no names. What was the book you mentioned earlier regarding No Escape? Are there other books you recommend on this type of subject? Yeah, Pema Chodron. I'm almost sure. Yeah, it was Pema Chodron, The Wisdom of No Escape. A good book on this is by Aya Khema, also a Buddhist nun, Ayya, I believe, Khema. Never actually researched who that person is, but I remember years ago reading this book called Being Nobody, Going Nowhere. It's like, yes, being nobody, going nowhere. The Tao Te Ching, essentially the Taoist Bible. So Tao Te Ching, spelled with a T, T-A-O. So the Tao Te Ching is like the Taoist Bible, and it really acknowledges the virtue of being alone. Chung Tzu in the Book of Changes, the I Ching, is going to have a similar type of philosophy about the virtue of being a forest hermit, forest monk. One of my favorite books in this is The Cloud Should Know Me by Now. The Cloud Should Know Me by Now. When I lived in California, I lived on the top of a mountain in the clouds, basically. Like there's a lot of cloud cover where I was. And then now I live up in the Adirondack Park in the mountains, and not as much cloud cover, but still, and I'm a paraglider. So I love the title. The Cloud Should Know Me by Now. That's a compilation of a lot of different Chinese, Buddhist, monks, but really like these solitary guys who just live up in the mountains. And they just meditate and they might have a visitor once a month. Why would a well-educated, intelligent, healthy adult who could really do anything they want out of life, why would they go sit alone like that? Okay, so we talked about you're going to go through a process of, I can recommend other books if you want to email me. There's a lot more where that comes from. This is such a great topic for me. So I got lots of other resources. But what happens when your blockages are purifying over time? So you can do that alone. You can do that with others. You can do that in hypnotherapy. Either way, you got to clear the blocks in your heart. Silence is just one, well, silence and solitude, just one great way to do that. Why silence, by the way? Khalil Gibran wrote in The Prophet, we speak when we cease to be at peace with our thoughts. How often when you got to call a friend, what do you got to do? You're venting your stuff, right? You two are commiserating. You're sharing in your difficult, and that's, great. That's what friends are for. I'm not saying you shouldn't have relationships, but how are you utilizing that relationship? In the way I've been talking, it's often what's called in A Course in Miracles, a special relationship, where I'm needy and you're needy, and we'll come together and be needy together, but hopefully we won't feel as needy because we're together. When you're alone, you're forced to feel much more self-reliant, right? You have to really tap into your strength. But when you're alone, you have to look at your false beliefs. Oh my God, I feel so weak. All right, well, heal that and realize how strong you are. But I feel so powerless without this person. Good, heal that and realize how powerful you are. But I felt so unlovable if I'm by myself. Good. Sit till you can feel how lovable you are. But I hate myself. I don't want to be alone. Good. Sit there until you can love yourself. So I could go on and on about the shifts that keep occurring from these kind of what seem like negatives to positives. But I'm not saying you should sit there and paint your inner world all positive with creative visualization. You just want to get to where the Buddha got to, which is a state called shunya, or enlightened, where he was empty. Empty of what? Empty of all that stuff. Empty of a separate neurotic self. Empty of the ego, right? So Course in Miracles is all about the shift out of ego back into spirit. But here's the beautiful thing about Course in Miracles and Buddhism, and any teaching that points you directly to your true self. Underneath all your stuff, which again can be cleared, underneath all of that is your perfect true self, which has been living a life. I'll explain what I mean here. It might sound like bipolar or like a dissociative identity disorder, but listen carefully. Underneath all of your neurotic ego and worries, your deeper self has been living its life uninterrupted all the time. Now, what do I mean by that? Your conscious mind has been monkey mind, wackadoodle for most people. Your emotions, your heart, not okay, right? All the hurt, sadness, fear, anger, grief, guilt, and all those negative beliefs humans hold, right? And all the subconscious suppression, creating anxiety and depression. That can all be healed by somebody who's willing to just sit still alone. So all of that gets to clear. All of that negative stuff is temporary. But again, we're not trying to paint that picture positive. What happens when all the blocks clear is your true self, which was always there all the time, will still be there. You won't hate that self. I promise you, you will love that self. You'll find your hurt, scared inner child when you're sitting there alone. You will learn to comfort and heal that little boy or girl. And then you'll learn to love how precious and adorable and wonderful your inner child is. You'll sit there and you'll hear your inner parent's voice. Oh, you shouldn't be alone. Look at you. You're never going to amount to anything. Look at you. You never got married. You're going to notice your parent's voice in there saying all that stuff. Keep letting it go. Keep letting it go. You're just watching them like clouds passing before you. I'm telling you, it's an extremely hard practice, but the longer you can do it, again, half hour morning, half hour evening, or take a day on the weekend. Like, again, whenever you can be alone, practice sitting there doing nothing. You will notice how many inner characters are in your head. We're always so busy seeing other people, but when you stop and be still, you got a lot of voices in your head. None of those are your real self, right? So every time you hear your inner mom, your inner dad, your inner spouse, your children's voice, like all these people live in our minds, right? And they're all centered around this one character called I, or my wife, my kid, my this, my that. When you sit, you realize it's all a fiction. The the me, myself, my own, is a mental fiction, because when you're clear and empty, that's not there. Nobody has to say mine. There's no more need for walls. There's no more need for possessiveness. So what's left? And by the way, it's not a sacrifice. When you sit still and be alone, all you're really doing, and this is pure Course in Miracles, you're sorting out the valuable from the valueless. During the weekend workshop on A Course in Miracles, I'll be taking everybody through the 5 major stages that occur for a teacher of God in A Course in Miracles. As you're going through those, you start to understand Spirit is taking you through a sorting out process. Simply stated, all right, I seemed like I lost my significant other. Now I'm here alone. Was that even valuable? Okay, maybe for the time, you got some growth out of it, sure. But you have to start questioning what's really valuable. What is real love? What is real pleasure? Where's real peace found? Where's real joy found? We all know you have to seek the kingdom within. You have to find the love and the joy within. That's what happens when you sit and you make yourself be alone. You follow the deepest teaching. Find God within. So what do you find when all those layers of pain and negativity clear? Again, not a self that you have to create. You've already been created. According to Course in Miracles, you're a perfect creation of God. You're the part of God happening as you. You're a child of God. So what is that being? Pure love. You are so infinitely lovable, you can't even grasp it. You're loved more than you could possibly imagine. You, according to Rumi, you are more precious than heaven and earth, because those things will fade away. But you're the eternal, immortal self. That's what these teachings show us. So is there a sacrifice to find out that you are immortal divine bliss? Is it a sacrifice to find out that infinite divine guidance is always there for you at every moment? Is it a sacrifice to tap into divine guidance that offers you abundance, prosperity, meaning, and purpose? Well, let's talk about that. When you're lost in the ways of the world, caught up in the matrix, doing what they programmed you to do, right? We're hypnotists, right? We're a hypnotherapy school. We're not programming you like to put you to sleep, or we're programming you to wake up. We're unprogramming you. We're helping you to unlearn the errors that were created, that were developed, throughout one's life. Okay, so in the process of clearing out, the process of freeing your heart and your mind from those old patterns, you start to discover something much more beautiful and valuable and worthwhile. So when you're caught up in the ways of the world, you're probably, a lot of people are working a job making somebody else rich, right? You might be much more of a sheeple, right? Like a sheeple, in case you haven't heard that one. You might be more of a sheeple than you realize. A lot of us, we can say, oh, they're all sheeples. If you don't take time out of the matrix, you might be more caught up in it than you think, right? It's really all one big illusion. Like, it really is a big illusion. And if you don't just stop and pull away from it every so often, you're more caught up than you think. So if you don't know what your mission is and your purpose is and the reason you're on this planet, then one of the best things to do, take time in silence and solitude, right? You might not be comfortable being alone, but it's so important to realize you're not the first one who's walked the spiritual path, who said, I want to know who I am. I want to know my mission. I want to know my purpose. I want to know where I came from. I want to know where I'm going, right? Those of us who ask the deeper questions tend to be more introverted anyway. And the journey inwards is where we get our answers. So everything I do in my life, corporate name, values, principles, goals, projects, objectives, student learning outcomes. I mean, everything we do as a state licensed school, which keeps growing and growing, is based on divinely inspired principles, on mission and purpose that comes from higher power. So that's the most practical thing you can do, right? Don't turn to your neurotic conscious mind to run your life. Don't turn to your emotionally disturbed heart to run your life. Let all that get clear. So we say in hypnotherapy, the only way to superconscious mind, and there is such a thing, the only way to superconscious mind is through subconscious mind. All right, so how are you going to find, let me give you some other synonyms for this. Superconscious mind, oversoul, higher self, Holy Spirit, divine mind. If there's any truth to something behind those words, wouldn't that be worth knowing? If someone created this Course in Miracles, if someone created you, wouldn't it be good to know who that is? If someone gave you purpose, wouldn't it be good to be in touch with that someone? So what we do in intense silence and solitude, there's not just meditation. For some people, they prefer the prayer and communion model in that, because the truth is you're never alone. Even if your body isn't with other bodies, we are all one. What you discover in the intense silence and solitude is there's one love that permeates the whole universe, because when you get totally clear, that's what's left. Again, it was running its own life, even with all your neuroticism going. God was still doing her thing. The Tao was still doing its thing, even though you were neurotic, right? So like I was saying, under the surface, your real life has been continuing on uninterrupted. All of your love, your mission, your joy, it's all there, right? But it's lying in potential because you haven't let it blossom through you yet. So how do we really cook and burn away the dross of the false self and make way for like our real true self? One way to, again, there's many spiritual paths, but one major component of pretty much any spiritual path I've looked at is that monks and nuns and deep spiritual practitioners spend time alone. Right? And again, it can be really hard at first, but it's important to remember many other people have walked this spiritual path before us. If we just follow in their footsteps and we have faith, right, that what they said, right, study people like Mayor Baba, Ramakrishna, Paramahansa Yogananda, like study the teachings of Christ, beautiful teachings from that are, of course, miracles and also the way of mastery. When you study any of this stuff, you realize those who channeled or delivered these materials, they don't have a problem being alone. What did they describe as their inner experience? Unconditional love and light and joy and peace and wisdom and communion. So it's not just when I sit alone, there's no one there. What happens when all your veils drop away is, I'll just use the G word, but you can call it whatever you like. The presence of God is right here now. In spirituality, you don't have to actually seek God. God knows where you are. According to A Course in Miracles, God knows where you are. Well, where's God? Right here. Couldn't be any closer. So when your mind is done with all the ego stuff, what happens is in A Course in Miracles, you start surrendering your mind, all this stuff, which you don't know what to do with, obviously, right? Why is your heart so disturbed? Maybe you don't know what to do with it. Why is your mind such a mess? It's untrained, and it wasn't given to a higher, wiser power. When we surrender that to Holy Spirit, super conscious, when we go through the pain, but we're willing to give it to something higher, we discover that something higher is always there, that something higher is constantly trying to heal you if you would just leave it alone. Right? Once you're healed, once you're clear, when there's no more karma, no more blockages, no more pain, just try to imagine what that's like if that's new for you. What would it be like to just be supremely clear? You would actually hear the voice for God. And then you realize, oh, that's why silence and solitude zip the lip, right? Because when you don't let yourself talk, you realize, oh my God, you're talking all the time. You won't shut up in there. You're not listening. So what do we learn to do in meditation or deep prayer? We start listening. So prayer, when you're praying to that higher mind, it's still you talking. Revelation comes from God. This is Course in Miracles, comes from God to us, not from us to God. You don't tell God how it is. I'm so alone and nobody loves me and I'm worthless and I'm never going to make enough money. And God's like, who are you talking to? Why are you saying such silliness? That's what we do when we're just talking. And if you put your hands like this and keep doing it, it doesn't matter. It's still neurotic. The more you just let it go, you have a real mind in there, but it's created by God, right? What does the Bible say? Something like, let the thoughts you think like be the thoughts of Christ Jesus. And I don't mean to be religious on you guys. In A Course in Miracles, it says, I think the thoughts I think with God. Are you thinking the thoughts you think with God? Those are valuable thoughts. Those are money makers. Those are the thoughts that bring you love and joy and harmony and goodness. So it's a period of time to harmonize your human self, to transform your ego, really. Once it's really clear, the prayer is more of a communion. It's kind of like I love you, and spirit's like, yeah, I love you too. And it talks to you and it comforts you and it guides you, and it's much wiser and much smarter than you ever could imagine until you start interacting more with it. So some people just call it the presence of God. I have no problem saying that, but a lot of people are want to use other words. Fine. Call it whatever you want. But are you listening to a mind that is sane, clear, logical, rational, and consistent all the time? Or are you listening to a mind that is disturbed and chaotic and confused and makes mistakes and on and on? So once you see the difference between spirit and ego, A Course in Miracles is all about discerning the difference, right? So is it spirit or is it ego? We'll go here. Is it ego or is it spirit? Is it fear or is it love? Fear ruins our life. Love, that stuff, ego, fear, that creates psychosomatic illness. Love is the healing energy. In A Course in Miracles, it says the healed healer is far too evolved to believe in illness. So is our model, like I was saying earlier, medicine or therapy, is it just about diagnosis and illness? Or is our model of healing a movement towards oneness consciousness, a movement towards your true self? Right? That's what hypnotherapy needs to be. That's why we're interpersonal hypnotherapy. It is about our relationship to other people. So in closing, and then I'll open up to any question or answer, after a lot of time of spiritual silence, spiritual discipline, silence and solitude, and honestly, this is not a 1-year path. This is 10 years, 20 years. Doesn't mean you're alone for all that time, but realize if you're an advanced meditator, you're going to be doing that for decades. So as you mature in your practice over decades, at some point you realize, wow, no matter how alone I am, I'm not alone. Minds are joined. Course in Miracles, minds are joined. And as long as there's still one slave on this earth, you will never be free. This is where the Bodhisattva vow of Buddhism comes in. If you, or when, because it's inevitable, it's just how quickly do you get there, when you get to your own personal wholeness, enlightenment, self-realization, self-actualization, there's one major thing left. The realization that all of your other brothers and sisters, the majority of them, are not there. They're really suffering, right? There is war, there is famine, there is sickness. There are people raiding 7-Elevens, and those people are miserable and hungry, and and there's people shooting each other every day. Okay, so when you meditate alone, you're not unaware of that, and you're not pretending it doesn't exist, because in oneness, you're intimately aware of that boy who just got shot, right? So what do you feel in an open heart when you hear about what's happening out there? Compassion, the love, seeing the pain of your own self shooting each other, you feel compassion. So my experience of this is like, imagine being like an angel. You're just sitting here, came down from heaven, and you only know the ways of heaven, right? Where forgiveness isn't ever necessary and love is all there is. And then you're like, why did you just shoot yourself? Why are you raping and murdering yourself? Why are you children of God killing and hurting each other? You start to see the incredible insanity of the ego once you pull away from it. But if you're kind of flirting in it, you get desensitized to it. It becomes like the norm. You can watch movies of people killing each other, video games, and now it's just happening out there. Like seriously, and it's kind of always been happening out there. But in A Course in Miracles, until that mess stops, the teachers of God are necessary, that we need to be helpful. We need to be of service. So this is where the intense silence and solitude leads to some type of service in the world. I've chosen to do that through hypnotherapy, through Anahat meditation, through our life mastery course, through neurolinguistic programming, right? But that's where the purpose and the meaning is. So if you're wondering, what should I be when I grow up? And, what is my purpose? I guarantee you it has something to do with healing this major problem, which Holy Spirit or higher self is aware of, right? And you have a part to play in cleaning that up. If you don't know what that part is, then silence and solitude, because no one else can tell you what it is, right? Only that higher, wiser mind can tell you who you are. In A Course in Miracles, you get confused. You think you can tell God who you are, as if it's up to you to make that up or to provide that answer. That's insanity. Only that which created you can tell you what you are. But if you don't take the time to listen to that voice, so practice in your silence and solitude, can you get your mind totally quiet? That takes years of practice, but more and more, you will hear that higher, wiser mind. You just have to have trust and faith that there is a path towards that if you haven't, depending where you're at with that. But no matter where you're at, if you're listening to this, it probably means it's a nice reminder to realize. Course in Miracles says, I thank you, God, for your guarantee of only happy outcomes. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, but the closer you get to the light, the more you see your shadow. So the real work is the shadow self work. What's the best way to do it? Sit alone by yourself. You will see your shadow. But honestly, I can give a whole nother hour talk about doing this with other people, because while silence will clear a lot of blocks, being with others will clear the rest, right? So value both. When you're with others and they push your buttons, awesome. Now you can go sit by yourself and burn through your blockages. When you're sitting by yourself, you got a blockage come up, okay, maybe you can go talk to a friend, but you're realizing my priority are to clear the blocks to the awareness of love's presence. That becomes your only job. In A Course in Miracles, in closing here, your only job, your only responsibility is to accept the atonement for yourself. Accept the at-one-ment for yourself. And when you sit alone, you're either saying, I choose heaven, I choose love, I choose bliss, I choose light, I choose peace, or you're having insane thoughts, choosing something else, which makes you miserable. How do you know you're not choosing the thoughts you think with God? If you're not happy, if you're not at peace, if you're not feeling joy and bliss and love, if you're not just truly content from within, something's wrong. You're blocked. Miracles are meant to naturally occur. If they're not occurring, something has gone wrong. A miracle in this context is a shift from illusion to truth, from fear to love. It's meant to be happening all the time. It's only if we hold it all together that doesn't occur. Forgiveness is to just let go. Just keep letting it go. Keep letting it go. Eventually, your heart gets clear. Your mind gets clear. Your body gets healthier. You get wiser. You tend to get wealthier. And everything seems to be made better off. All right, great. So feel free to ask any questions or share anything, and then we'll wrap it up for the evening. And again, in the future, we'll be going to the Illuminated Mind podcast model, where I'll be happy to share these kind of teachings, but with other people who I'll be interviewing as well. All right, how does this teaching overlap with the philosophy of samadhi? Yeah, absolutely. So, well, they don't really talk about samadhi directly in A Course in Miracles, so let's work to relate the two. When you move into samadhi, let me define that term. That really just means oneness, right? What's the best way to say what is samadhi? The experience, the non-dual experience of absolute bliss consciousness. Okay, so samadhi is your oneness with source, absolute bliss consciousness, right? So the yogis, right, and Buddhists, we kind of all use the same terms there. We're working to get into samadhi. How do we do it? Sit on a meditation cushion. That's called asana. Step one, assume the position, right? Get on a meditation cushion. If you can't sit lotus, fine, sit in a chair, but take time and sit still. Then what do we do in yogic practice? We start something called pranayama, regulating the control of the life force energy, or as people often know, different forms of breath work. We're learning to purify the energy meridians in pranayama, and we're learning to find the prana, the chi, the life force, the healing energy, or it could be called the Ruach HaKodesh in Hebrew, the Holy Spirit, right? So your breath energy is pranayama, or prana is the breath energy. Yam means to control, but that's a whole nother topic. It's not a great English translation, but pranayama, you're working with your life force energy. Then in the practice of samadhi, we have to do what's called pratyahara. We're withdrawing our attention from the outside world inside. You can't really do that as a beginner. I'm just going to say maybe very advanced practitioners could do this while they're dancing or doing other things. But for a beginner, the recommended thing is get on a meditation cushion, sit still, and then pratyahara is to direct your attention away from your senses and inwards, but inwards to where? Then we go into samadhi, which is a practice of what's called dharana, dhyan, samadhi. I don't want to get too complicated here for you in this one question, but one thing is like I know the teachings is just a lot to explain. So when we do samadhi practice, we withdraw inside, we do dharana concentration, dhyan, deep meditation, and then samadhi is oneness. Okay, now if we're doing that practice up into that space of pure consciousness, we will transcend the heart and the mind. So you'll find that higher conscious observer if you practice those teachings, but then you have to learn about your relationship to your heart and your mind. So once you find that higher observing consciousness, which is essentially the practice of deep samadhi, then you can look up into spirit, right? Like what's up in that consciousness, but you can sit in that space and look down at the human. And then the teachings are exactly the same. I mean, these are yogic teachings, essentially, which is how do we clear the sanskars or the karmic seeds in our hearts, and how does that clear mind? I'm just saying heart and head, right? But really, in yoga, we have the chakra system. Those are only two of the chakras. But the teaching, if you expand it, says we need to clear all the chakras. How do we do that? We let the Kundalini Shakti clear the blockages in the chakra system. That's just another way of saying we forgive, we let go, we let God, right? So in yogic practice, we talk about letting go of the sanskars to let the prana purify. Again, prana is that healing life force energy. Let the prana clear your blocks. In Course in Miracles, we say just forgive, let go, and let the Holy Spirit heal your heart and mind. Right, so either way, you're giving it to a higher power. In Chinese medicine, all we do with acupuncture is put in a needle and get that energy to flow. But no Chinese medical doctor would claim to be the healer, right? We're just the one that gets the life force energy moving again, right? I got into Chinese medicine because I knew I needed to clear the blocks to love's presence. Okay, so let me know if that helps. But yeah, samadhi is a very complex topic. If for anybody listening, if you want to go deeper into that, then we have a workshop already done. You can listen to his recordings called the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali to take you very deep into yogic practice. But again, this upcoming weekend, Course in Miracles workshop. All right. Hello. No names, but another question. How do you balance being an introvert? And I don't have that balance. I don't know. Let me read what you wrote. How do you balance being an introvert and loving being alone, and then knowing you are here to teach and serve in a bigger way? Beautiful. My experience has been I have a lot of family and a lot of friends and a lot of colleagues and a lot of staff, and yet I just take time away from it. So when I was a great spiritual teacher, Andrew Harvey, he was talking about Rumi and the stages the great masters get to, and he said they have a balance, but it's not a balance of the ways of the world. Rumi knew he had a mighty purpose, this glorious mission to infuse the world with divine love. Right. And so he was with his students. Rumi had a lot of students. He had his teacher Shams. Right. These great beings have relationships. The difference is, and I'll speak Course in Miracles again, they know what everything is for. So in A Course in Miracles, it says, you know what a telephone is, but you don't know what it's for. Right. So for instance, people who use the internet to cause hate crimes or whatever horrible things people are doing with the internet, it's just a neutral tool. Right, like a knife, right? You can use it to chop vegetables, or you can use it to do horrible things to other human beings, right? So a saint who's living at that place doesn't really have balance the way the world sees balance. It's not necessarily a balance between your career and your wife and your kids and your, this is a balance of divine purpose, but then your relationships all become, I'll use the best word, utilized for that, but you're not like using people. It's just God is coordinating relationships to help you to fulfill your purpose. In A Course in Miracles, you realize there are no accidents. Every day has lessons that are already laid out for you. The people you're going to meet did not happen by accident. So at the end of every day, when you interact with your humans, you interact with the other humans, and then go sit alone by yourself. And what I do is what I call the daily review show. Right? And I did it this afternoon. Like I had some interesting interactions with other humans today. And then I was like, oh, that was interesting. All right, interesting day. Thank you, God. And then I sit and I let whatever the term in Sanskrit is chit vrittis, all the waves of your mind and heart. All right. So everybody has those, but the question is, what do you do with them? When you're done interacting with the humans and you take some time alone, Let your energy just do its thing. Observe. Oh, that made me sad today. Good. Feel it until it clears. Don't suppress it. Be sure it gets empty by the end of the day. So, personally, and I could be wrong, and if there's some shadow part of me, I want to know, but generally, I don't feel like I'm carrying anything from the past anymore. I sit down at the end of the day. I feel whatever's there. I forgive it. I release it. I let it go. Once I feel like, all right, I got my lessons. I know what's going on for that. Good. Done. Never think of it again. I'm not saying suppress it. I'm saying you are so complete with the day. Tomorrow is a completely new day. And then you will interact with people again. And they will push your buttons and you will learn stuff and you will grow and you will collaborate and do whatever you do. And then when you have time again, Course in Miracles just says when you start the day, start it with God. When you end the day, end it with God. Just sit still in the morning, sit still in the evening, and that might be as much as you get to do if you're married and you have kids and all that. But again, somebody like me, who I said I'm qualified to do this talk because I can go really extreme with being alone. But maybe that'll be a year or two in my life, and then I'll be back into a relationship again. So again, it's kind of a balance of both. But I'm just going to encourage, when you think about these higher states of spiritual functioning, it's not a normal worldly balance. It's I'm drunk on God. I'm listening to God who tells me what to do. And then I'm interacting with other people because that's in harmony with divine will. That's how I see it anyway. How do you try to keep this understanding of the illusionary world when we are surrounded by the density of illusions constantly? You can meditate and sit alone, but as soon as you step into work, you fall back into, you're welcome for the other question, thank you. You fall back into the old patterns. That's where spiritual practice comes in. So what happens when you say, all right, this is a matrix. This is an illusion, right? This whole thing about money, this is a made up illusion. We all just agreed upon that this paper nothingness, which is nothingness, there's no gold standard. It's just all a big illusion. Okay. So to deny that that's there is the wrong use of denial, according to A Course in Miracles. You can't deny you have a body. You can't deny there's a world out there. Okay. But when you take your time alone, which can be 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes in the evening, you're dedicating that time to truth. Now, just block out the day. Start it and end it with that. As you start appreciating the value of that 5 minutes and 5 minutes, you'll start expanding it because it's more blissful. It feels good. You're clearer. You have more peace. You have more insight about what to do. You're more intuitive. You just became smarter. Colors became brighter. Your skin got clearer. I mean, you lost weight. Everything gets better the more you just do that. You just start expanding the time. It's like, now I did an hour. Now I did an hour. It'll start staying with you. I was in college learning. I didn't learn most of this at college, but during this age I did. And I was working at a drugstore, which I never did much of that kind of thing, actual jobs. But in college, I had this one little job. And I just remember sitting behind the counter late at night at this drugstore. And I'm like, this is all an illusion. There's none of this is real. So you start just walking around and it stays with you. I just feel like I'm walking around observing this planet, but I'm not from this planet. I'm the observer of the human experience. You just have to spend more time in meditation to develop the seat of the soul. Eventually, you're so solid in who you are as this observing consciousness, you'll literally be driving the car. So practice sitting up here, like you're looking through your third eye point. Like, don't look at me now through these eyes. Look at me now through this eye. And don't look at my body. Just go zoop, like an octave higher, and kind of start just peripherally looking at the aura. Stop looking at details. Stop judging. Stop labeling. In the Identity of Relative and Absolute Sutra of Zen Buddhism, it says, if you do not see the way, you do not see it even as you walk on it. Do not judge by any standards. And then it says, I respectfully say to those who wish to be enlightened, do not waste your time by night or day. So that means you are training like a martial artist, right? Or a soldier getting ready for battle, like a spiritual warrior. You're getting on the meditation cushion morning and evening, carving out more and more time. And practice sitting up here, looking through here, realizing you're a soul looking through eyeballs, right? You're a divine consciousness looking through eyeballs. You're not a brain, right? So get used to the idea that I'm an observing consciousness. Now you'll take that off the cushion. The great Saint Ramakrishna, he said, the more time you give to God, the more of your responsibilities God takes away. Right? Because Spirit wants you to take this journey and to come home. Spirit knows you're unhappy out there. Right? If you don't go within, you go without. And going without means you're in a valueless, meaningless world. I know a lot of people don't believe that, but that's why A Course in Miracles came to us, to tell you the illusion is valueless. Spirit, the real self, the thing you truly love, and the people you truly love, you love their spirit. You love spirit. You love love. So the more you just take time in that, each day, expand that. The other part actually becomes less because you're expanding that. I find I can do more of this part and make more money than if I'm busy there. When you're in and what I'm saying here, with my fingers, is meditation time. The more time you spend there, the more the right people come to you. You don't go out to others. You find they come to you. Very rare do I reach out to another human being. They just tend to show up because they tend to be drawn to light, to love, to healing, to careers, like everything good you could offer a person. So again, the more time you spend in the meditation chunks of your day, the more that part will seem like an illusion. The more time you spend in samadhi here, when you open your physical eyes, you're like, wow, I'm like on this other planet in this dream, and it's holographic, and it's 3D, and there's people, and cool. But yeah, keep remembering it is a dream. All right. I love the Zen teaching. Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Yeah, it's an extremely advanced state, though, to just chop wood and carry water. Anybody could say they do it, but they don't do it. So while we meditate in Zen practice, we don't actually call it meditation. It's called sitting Zen. Then there's walking Zen. Then there's eating Zen. That's the Zen answer to how do we take it off the cushion and integrate it into the illusion. Zen doesn't tend to call it an illusion because you create these ideas in your mind, truth and illusion. But when you're just clear, it's very clear that there's the absolute and the relative. Zen will be very comfortable calling it the absolute reality and the relative plane. The relative plane is temporary and illusory. The absolute, definitely according to A Course in Miracles, is eternal. So again, we start valuing that, but we find that gives us all the fuel we need to deal with the illusion really well. Beautiful. All right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you interacting with me. We'll wrap it up unless I see any other questions. So yeah, look for new advertising promotion for the Illuminated Mind podcast and hopefully some awesome guests. If anybody's watching this and you think, hey, I'd like to be a guest on the Illuminated Mind podcast, then reach out to us at instituteofhypnotherapy.com. And I'll be happy to talk to you. The next month, we're going to dedicate to spirituality, enlightenment, and hypnotherapy. And I'll be working to bring in some guests to talk to you guys, whoever's going to be listening, about that. All right. And then again, upcoming workshop this Saturday. Just check out instituteofhypnotherapy.com. If you miss it, you can watch it as recordings. But this Saturday, A Course in Miracles workshop. All right, great. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening and hope to see you soon. I didn't understand.